Everyone in town knew to avoid the whispering woods at night. Stories of eerie voices and shadows kept people away. But when Marcus, Lena, and Sam stepped inside, they found that the forest wasn't just full of stories. It was alive, and it had been waiting for them. Cedar Pines was a town wrapped in secrecy, tucked deep into a valley where the whispering woods cast its shadow over everything. Everyone in town had heard tales of the woods, whispers of strange sightings, people who disappeared, the shadows that moved on their own. But most chilling were the whispers that lured people deeper, calling their names with a voice no one dared answer. On a cool autumn evening, three friends, Marcus, Lena, and Sam, stood at the edge of those woods, flashlights casting beams into the darkness. They were no strangers to dares and haunted stories, and tonight they were ready to prove the Whispering Woods were nothing but old folklore. "Come on, we're doing this, right?" Sam said, pretending his voice wasn't shaking. "Of course," Lena replied, though her eyes darted between the trees. "Let's show everyone we're not scared of some ghost stories." But as they stepped into the woods, their laughter faded. The air felt thicker, the silence too loud. Each step seemed to pull them deeper, as though the forest itself had been waiting for them. After a few minutes, they reached a clearing, a perfect circle where the trees seemed to lean in, towering, casting long shadows across the ground. And then it began. "Marcus." The voice was soft, almost a breeze, but it made the hairs on his neck stand on end. He stopped, eyes wide, and looked at his friends. Did you hear that?" Sam shook his head, but his face was pale. Lena just swallowed, her hands trembling as she gripped her flashlight tighter. They continued, each of them growing more uneasy as the whispers grew louder and clearer. It was no longer just Marcus's name. The forest seemed to know all of them. "Lena, Sam," panic set in. The path they'd come from was gone, swallowed by the endless stretch of trees. They were alone with the voices, and the way back no longer existed. Their laughter was now a distant memory, replaced by the creeping dread that the stories weren't just stories after all. They turned back, but the forest didn't let them go, drawing them deeper into the heart of its darkness. At the center of the clearing was an abandoned cabin. Its walls sagged, and strange symbols were carved into the wood, symbols that pulsed under their flashlights. Against their better judgment, they pushed open the door and stepped inside, the whispers now surrounding them, voices overlapping in urgent pleas. They were trapped, the shadows shifting along the walls, eyes watching from every corner. The shadows seemed to move with purpose, inching closer, pulling them toward the cabin's dark heart. When they tried to leave, they found only more forest, twisting, changing with every turn. The trees closed in, and they felt the whispers seeping into their minds, calling them, urging them to stay. In a final attempt, they broke free, running through the darkness, their breaths coming in short, frantic gasps. When they reached the edge of the woods, they collapsed, drenched in sweat and filled with a dread they couldn't shake. The Whispering Woods had let them go, but as they looked back, they knew they hadn't left the forest behind. The darkness had followed. After escaping the forest, the three friends returned home, each haunted by the whispers that had called their names, unable to shake the feeling that something had followed them back. They tried to brush it off, calling themselves silly, yet each felt an inexplicable weight, a sense of being watched. That night, Marcus lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The silence was too loud, the darkness too thick. Just as he was about to drift off, he heard it, a scratching at his window, faint but insistent. His heart pounded as he reached for his flashlight, his hands trembling. He turned it on, expecting to see branches swaying, but his window was still. And yet, he felt it, a presence, watching. In her room, Lena lay awake, wide-eyed. She could hear her breathing, but now and then, another sound would creep in. a faint laugh echoing from the shadows. She sat up, clutching her blanket, and that's when she saw it. A dark, wet handprint on her wall, as if someone had pressed their palm against it moments before. Sam had it worse. He woke up, unable to move, pinned by an invisible weight pressing on his chest. His eyes darted around the room, searching for something, anything that could explain it. In the corner, a shadow shifted, creeping closer. He felt a chill deep in his bones, a feeling of dread that left him gasping. The next morning, they met at the local diner, each of them pale and shaken. "It followed us," Lena whispered, barely able to speak the words. Marcus nodded, his face drawn. "The shadows. I think they're still with us." They began researching the woods, desperate for answers, learning of a boy who had vanished a century ago, lured into the forest by voices. His name was Jacob, and his body was found days later, his face twisted in terror. Some claimed his spirit haunted the woods, lost and seeking revenge on anyone who dared to enter. The more they read, the more they felt the forest wasn't just calling them. It wanted to consume them, to make them a part of its endless darkness. Each night grew worse, the whispers louder, the shadows bolder, creeping closer. They could feel the forest's grip tightening, refusing to let them go. Mirrors reveal truth, but sometimes they show things that don't want to let go. After their haunting encounter with the Whispering Woods, Marcus, Lena, and Sam felt something had followed them back. Each night, shadows crept closer, and whispers grew louder. Desperate, they sought help from Agnes, a local psychic with ties to the spirit world. Agnes listened in silence to their terrifying experiences, her gaze solemn. "The forest has marked you. These shadows feed on fear, using reflections to draw closer. Tonight, they'll call through mirrors. Don't look away, and whatever you do, do not respond. If you break the rules, they'll take your place." That night, they covered their mirrors, but as midnight approached, an unbearable urge to uncover them took hold. Something whispered from the other side of the glass, calling them. Marcus was first to give in. Heart pounding, he uncovered his mirror, his flashlight casting a faint glow. His reflection stared back, but his eyes were too dark, his mouth twisted into an unnatural smile. "Come back, Marcus," the reflection whispered, its voice a warped echo. "We're waiting." He tried to look away, but his reflection's gaze held him captive, the smile stretching wider, revealing too many teeth. A chill seeped into his bones as if the reflection was reaching into his soul. Summoning strength, he closed his eyes, breaking the spell. When he looked again, his reflection was normal, but the voice's memory lingered. Across town, Lena lay in bed, feeling the same pull. She uncovered her mirror to find her face staring back, but wrong. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth stretched into a twisted smile. "Come closer, Lena," her reflection whispered, malice dripping from every word. "You belong with us." Her reflection pressed a hand against the glass, as if trying to break through. She stumbled back, breaking eye contact, her heart racing as the image faded. Sam resisted longest, but found himself staring into his mirror by midnight. His reflection smirked, eyes dark with malice. "Sam," it whispered, "why are you running? You can't escape us." He fought the urge to reach toward the glass, to let the shadows in, breaking eye contact just in time. The next morning they met at the diner, pale and shaken, speaking in hushed voices about their encounters. "It wasn't just a reflection," Marcus whispered, trembling. "It was something else. It wanted me." Lena nodded fearfully. "It was alive, trying to pull me in." Sam looked down. "The forest isn't done with us. It's using the shadows to keep us close." They returned to Agnes that evening, desperation clear on their faces. After listening, she sighed. "The shadows won't stop until they have what they want. To break their hold, you must return to the forest. Only by facing the darkness there can you free yourselves." That night, armed with flashlights, salt, and sage, they entered the Whispering Woods. The forest felt different, darker, the trees taller, shadows thicker. Every branch pulsed with ancient energy as whispers called their names, drawing them deeper. At the heart of the forest stood a boy with hollow eyes, pale and drawn. His mouth moved silently, shadows clinging to his form, pulling him into darkness. "Help me." His lips formed the words, eyes pleading. Lena stepped forward, but as she reached for him, the shadows surged. Her hand passed through him, leaving only cold emptiness. The shadows pressed against them, filling their minds with dark visions, faces twisted in agony, souls lost in endless darkness. The forest was testing them, waiting for courage or surrender. They joined hands, chanting Agnes's words, each syllable challenging the darkness. The shadows wavered, weakening under their voices, but the forest wasn't finished. Darkness surged, filling their vision as they felt its hunger pressing down, demanding a soul. As whispers grew louder and shadows pulled closer, they braced for the final test, knowing only one of them would walk away. The shadows are relentless, and the only way to escape is through sacrifice. The friends gathered their courage, stepping deeper into the forest, each of them acutely aware of the shadows that flitted between the trees, closing in, whispering their names. The forest was alive, a dark, twisted thing, pulling them toward its heart with an invisible hand. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, each one a twisted echo of their own voices. Lena shivered, the words filling her with a sense of dread she couldn't shake. They passed the old cabin, its walls marked with symbols that pulsed with an otherworldly light. The boy stood at the cabin's entrance, his hollow eyes fixed on them, his mouth forming words they couldn't hear. As they moved closer, the shadows pressed in, wrapping around the boy and pulling him back. Lena reached out, desperation filling her chest, but her hand passed through him as if he were made of mist. "Why can't we save him?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Because he's already part of them," Agnes's voice echoed in her mind, her words a haunting reminder that the forest took what it wanted and never let go. The friends formed a circle, holding hands, their voices joining in a desperate chant, hoping to break the forest's hold. But the shadows surged, a dark storm that swept over them, filling their minds with their darkest fears. Lena saw herself alone, her friends gone, the shadows her only companions. Marcus saw his own face twisted and dark, a reflection of the thing he feared most, a version of himself lost to the shadows. And Sam saw death, an endless void waiting for him, ready to consume him. But they held firm, their voices growing louder, each word a challenge to the darkness. The shadows wavered, their forms flickering, as though their power was weakening. And then, in that moment of clarity, Lena realized the truth. The forest demanded a sacrifice. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, her voice steady as she spoke. "Take me. Release them, and take me instead." The shadows surged, wrapping around her, pulling her into the darkness. Her friends cried out, but it was too late. Lena was gone, her sacrifice echoing in the forest's depths. The shadows faded, the boy's face softened, his soul finally free. Marcus and Sam stumbled out of the forest, broken, haunted by Lena's sacrifice. The whispers had faded, but the memory of the darkness lingered, a reminder that the forest's hunger was never truly satisfied. The forest's hunger is insatiable. Once it has tasted a soul, it never truly lets go. Days passed since Lena's sacrifice, and Marcus and Sam tried to return to life as it was. But something had changed in them, something dark and irreversible. They still felt the forest's grip, the shadows lingering at the edges of their minds. They had escaped, but the price was too high, and they could not shake the feeling that they'd left a part of themselves behind. The whispers started again, faint at first, like a murmur in a distant room. But as the nights wore on, the voices grew louder, insistent, filling their minds with a haunting familiarity. Each night, they saw her, Lena's face pale and hollow, her eyes wide with fear, her mouth moving in a silent scream. Unable to bear it any longer, Marcus called Sam, his voice a low, desperate whisper. "It's her. I see her every night. She's calling us." Sam's silence was heavy, filled with the same dread Marcus felt. "I see her too," he finally replied. "She's trapped. We have to go back." That night, they gathered at the edge of the Whispering Woods, the memories of their last journey flooding back. The air was colder, the trees seemed taller, leaning in like silent sentinels. Without speaking, they stepped into the darkness, each step bringing them closer. Memories of
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell